when brainstorming how to celebrate International Women's Day, we had a lot of ideas about who we wanted to bring to the office, whether it was an entrepreneur or someone who was successful in corporate. But what was really important to us was to bring someone who was a shining example of a successful Arab woman and someone from the region who had spent their time and spent their energy building something really, really cool. And so the theme for this year's International Women's Day is Balance for Better. And we couldn't think of someone better to have to talk about this theme than Sara Abdullah. Sara is the founder of Makuki World and is a successful entrepreneur from the region, has moved from corporate and has built her own business in quite a short amount of time. Makuki World is a platform for children. There's children's content in the form of, there's an app, there's a YouTube channel, and it's an interactive platform that is all in Arabic. And what's really fantastic about it is that there are a lot of social messages that are being conveyed through this platform. So I'll turn it over to Sara to talk a little bit more about her journey and Makuki World specifically. You are the chief writer, and the content is very dear to your heart. So I wanted to first start out by understanding why Makuki and what it means to you.
First of all, thank you very much for having me here today. It's an honor, especially on Women's Day. I take pride in that, so thank you. Why Makuki? Because it's all about stories and storytelling, and storytelling has always been so dear to my heart. I think that since the beginning of time, people came together around the fire at the time because of storytellers who always had something to say. And I think about all the stories that were told that at a certain point in time were seen as superpowers, like people crossing seas or climbing mountains or even flying. And I think about how those ideas were transformed into words, and how these words, with the repetition of them, and when they're told over and over again, allow one person to take a step forward and turn them into action. And I think the power of stories comes from here. It's the fact that an idea can become a word and a word can become an action is why I find it so magical. So for a very long time, I appreciated that. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to tell stories that are dear to my heart, that can possibly create a change. And what better way to create change than start with children? Because they are the adults of tomorrow. So if we want to aspire to something, we start young. And that's where the idea of creating content for children came from. I come from a corporate background. I started back in 2001. I was at Burnett advertising. And I worked there for a very long time, until in 2014, I took the step to quit. And being in the corporate world teaches you a lot. It teaches you that there's a structure. Everybody can do their job very well. They learn how to do a specific thing really, really well. And I was a producer. I produced TV commercials and radio commercials, post-production, animation. And I knew a little bit about everything, but a lot about production. And being here today actually reminds me of things I miss, which is really funny because we're talking about corporate versus startup. Seeing a room filled with people who have a laugh and a wonderful culture, and I'm sure all of you connect all the time and have great exchange. And this is a part that the corporate world offers you, which is amazing. But at the same time, as beautiful as the ship was and as safe, and it provided well, it had a captain which was leading it, and I didn't decide where we were going, and at a certain point in time I wanted to go somewhere else. So I wanted to be captain of my own boat at the time. So I decided to quit. And I don't think you quit in a day. I think the idea to leave where you are, where you're kind of happy and you love your job, and start something on your own, comes in different stages. It's an idea that starts, and I believe that ideas grow and grow bigger, and they just take over at a certain point in time where they become your companion. You wake up with this idea, you sleep with that idea, and everything you do is reflective of that idea. And that was Makuki. Makuki actually is the name of the company, of the startup, but it's the name of the main character at Makuki, who is an alien who comes from outer space, comes to Earth, and because of his curiosity decides to travel and comes here and sees the world for the first time with the eyes of a child. And this character was starting to build in my head, and because of my experience in production, I could see how he looks like, I could see where he can live, I could see what he will be doing, and we befriended each other for a year before I decided to leave what I was doing and just start a journey and begin my startup.
So going from that sort of concept phase to where it is right now, what was the process like, and what were the, particularly that this is a children's platform, what were the themes that you really wanted to include and make sure that were very prevalent in the stories that you're telling?
The idea was to have children's content in Arabic that is providing stories, songs, activities for the region. But it was not a business in a sense at the beginning. So it was the character, and then it was the type of content that I wanted to create that made it to a digital platform that then transformed into a business. And that was very important. It was a very important process for me. The Makuki is an application. It has story songs for children up to age 8. They're provided in Arabic. It's interactive, it's animated, it's fun. But that's not what it is. It's not a place, a library where we have content that meets 2 criteria children in Arabic goes into. That's not how we think. It's a world on its own that is supported by pillars. And those pillars were one of the first things we thought about. Those pillars are reflective of the values that Makuki stands for. And these values are imagination, knowledge, and responsibility. Because we are talking to children, and childhood is one of the most crucial phases in a human being's life. And as a content creator, we have the responsibility to make sure that our messages carry this responsibility with a lot of care. So the pillars were there, then the characters were born because of those values. So we have Makuki, our main character, and his friends, Mawhoob, Ma'luma, Mas'ula, each one delivering one of those messages in the stories or the songs that we're producing. And you know, these values are very broad, so imagination can mean anything and knowledge can mean anything, but what we had to do is decide and define the themes that will live under those values. So for us, imagination was anything that everything, with no limitation of time or space, children can go wild, regardless of the many restrictions that we do face in the Middle East. And while talking to our children, this is not real, this is not true, that is not right. We don't care, let them imagine. There is nothing right with an idea. Ideas can be anything, and they can be transformed into reality, and that was the first concept. Knowledge for us needed to stay away from preaching and teaching and education in that sense. Knowledge for us was showing journeys through storytelling of trial and error, failure, observation, and that's how children learn. And that was the knowledge that is being collected. Responsibility we spent a lot of time on because, again, being in the Middle East and speaking to Arab parents and Arab children, a lot of the responsibility values are derived from our traditions, from our values, especially in this part of the world. And what we wanted to do at Makuki is give it a broader look and feel. We wanted to treat children as responsible human beings and global citizens. So the subjects that fell under responsibility in our stories were not about just respecting the elderly and being kind to the young and being, doing your homework or anything. It was responsibility towards oneself, health, well-being, eating healthy, nutrition, sports. That's under responsibility for us. Responsibility towards the creatures who we live with, the animals, the plants, the trees, the environment, that fall under responsibility. And most importantly, responsibility towards our dreams, our aspirations. So also within the content creation, we are very keen on representation. And I'm very happy, it's Women's Day. And at Makuki, we take pride at fair representation of both males and females in our stories and our songs. Because I don't think that stories and content needs to be only reflective of the culture you're in, but also has to be aspirational to where you want to be and where you want to arrive, especially when you're working with children. So we just released actually a collection of professions, what kids can be when they grow up. And I'm very happy because we had a ballerina story and it had males and a girl and a boy, because we often forget boys when it comes to dancing. And it might not be the most acceptable thing now, but there are male dancers, there are boy dancers, and we have to celebrate them and encourage them and accept that this is a choice they're making. We had a girl judge, and it exists, it's there, they're a minority, but girls and boys have to look at those stories and find it normal. We have to normalize what we want to get to. And it's our job as content creators. If we want something to happen in the future, we have to make it normal today, visually. We have to hear it, we have to say it, we have to repeat it. We have a girl astronaut. I think it exists, but we want to aspire to have more. And that's how we deal with content in Makuki world.
And have you found that there's reception to this, to portrayals of things that are not traditional in our part of the world?
Yes, there's more reception than we think. I think a lot of our reaction to the market is based on assumptions of what is based on what exists. So we look at what exists and then we say, that's what the market wants, that's what the market needs, that's what the market likes. But that's not it. Give them what they didn't see, and then you'll know whether they are receptive to it or not. And they might not be now, but it's happening, it's a reality. So do we just keep ignoring it, or do we take responsibility in participating and contributing to change? Because it is up to us to create this change.
Absolutely.
And allow the educators to have tools to provide this visual normalization of change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to go back to this concept of being the captain of your own ship, because I think that's something that each of us individually, whether we're working in a corporate environment or thinking about starting our own thing, it comes to mind. And maybe talk to us a little bit about your journey towards actually taking that step and thinking about what it is that you truly wanted to do, realizing what your passion was, because it's a challenge I think a lot of people face.
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to start Makuki, and my experience was heavy on writing, on production, and I had to create something that I can that can turn into a business, because I wanted it to live on a digital platform, because I wanted to change as much as I can, and because this is the future, this is the world, and children love their apps. And it's interactive, and it's not a passive relationship. But getting there is a different story. So a lot of the founders of startups, as you may know, start their businesses because they love something. So somebody who starts an app about cars, for cars, is probably a car lover, but doesn't know much about finance or marketing or digital media or legal setups and so on and so forth. So it is very challenging because when I had my idea and when I had all the content ready and I worked with a developer to create actually a prototype and I worked with an animator and I put time and money into it. So for an entire year, I created a prototype of the app to be able to go to market and actually raise money. And that process is not very simple because there's a lot of market research that goes into it. You have to know, you have to put the figures. You have to understand how much it'll cost. You have to put the figures in phases. I didn't know what the phases were. I had to ask for a lot of advice, for a lot of help. I had to know who's in the market, who are the major players, what are they doing, is it working? If it's not, why isn't it? So a lot of validation goes into place. But then raising money is a completely different story because I'm a creative, I'm a content creator. I've done a lot of budgeting for production, but when you seek investment, you're kind of converting your words into a different currency. So I'm talking values, quality, stories, change, social change. And you have people in front of you who are thinking money, dollar signs, profit, revenue, and you're not gonna win if you don't convert. You have to find a way to convert everything you're saying into a language that is investment friendly. Otherwise it won't work. And that process alone was very difficult and very challenging because it's not me, it's not my element, it's not what I'm good at.
And it's
a new field for me. So that's where I sought a lot of advice. I had hours and hours of rehearsals with friends who are very dear friends to my heart, but we're very good at doing that part. We role played. I got upset because I told them to be honest, and they were, and I became defensive. So I went through rounds and rounds and rounds of presenting, getting rejection, presenting, getting challenged at a point that I had no idea about. And it was hard work because everybody wants the founder to go and pitch. And I can pitch my idea, but the business model, it's new to me. And it's still work in progress. So if years later, it will always be work in progress because you're always more comfortable in your element. I can talk about my cookie, the product, for hours. And then I have to talk about I have to go and speak about figures and numbers and conversion, and it takes more time. But that's normal, and I think it's a challenge that is shared by many founders. And I think that we are always reluctant to talk about it because you always don't want to seem like you don't know it all. But the truth is you don't know it all. Nobody knows it all. It's just impossible.
And I think there's a tendency for females to be a little bit more reluctant to take the step to ask for advice or to seek help for challenges that they're facing. Has that been your experience?
Yes. If I would give one advice to myself 3 years ago, I would say seek more advice without worrying about judgment. So today I'm not worried about judgment because I just simply don't care if I'm being judged or not. What I care about is the result of that conversation, because exchange is very important. But when I first started, I was always thinking, okay, the product is not there, it's not perfect. I know I want to talk with X or Y because they're very smart, but if I ask them questions, will they just assume that this question means I don't know anything? Will they say, come on, this was basic. If she doesn't know how to do this, you know,
Well,
how
we
is
have
she
faith in
running a
her.
business?
Yeah.
If she doesn't know this small finance, if she has to ask this finance question, how's she running a business? If she asks this tech question, how's she running a business? And you're always worried because there are two things you're doing. You want to seek advice, but you also want to prove your worth. And these can become very conflicting at times. So there's always a conflict on whether will this give away and expose all my lack of knowledge, and is that smart to do? But my advice is do it. It's okay. One person can think you don't know anything, but what you get out of that conversation will make you know 50% more, and when you speak to another person, you would have known 50% more.
Right.
And that's what matters. Yeah.
So speaking of challenges, I think everyone faces this to a certain extent, is balancing home life and or slash personal life with being a founder and having basically your work kind of follow you 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So how do you do it? How do you?
I don't have a balance. So there is no balance. I don't in my life, because balance means things are equal and things are not equal. My family comes first. And so I do find the term work-life balance a bit not, something that I go for.
Yeah.
I would say, how do I manage it all? I would talk about time management, if that makes more sense. So I'm a mother of two. I became a mother of two as I was starting Makuki and building it. And I have two beautiful daughters, Clara and Ella, 4 years and 2-year-olds. And Makuki is 3 years old. So you can imagine all the everything that goes into it. At the beginning, it was not easy because you are overwhelmed. I mean, a family doesn't come with a manual. Nobody tells you what to do. And more people come into your life, and you're still stuck with a 24-hour time frame. So they don't come with more hours, they don't come with nothing.
Just more responsibility.
Just more responsibilities. And so it was very challenging at the beginning, and it did throw things off balance at the beginning. And then I realized, okay, the only way to do it is to set the variables and the constants in my life. So there are constants that will never disappear, which is my relationship with my children, my well-being, and my deliverables at work. And there are variables that I can work with. And these variables are, how do I optimize my time? How do I become more efficient? How do I meet my deliverables at different hours, different phases? And I realized that you can't do everything. You can't. It's impossible. So you have to delegate and accept that there are people in your life that will give you help, and you can't take credit for it. So I have help at home who are taking care of my children when I'm working, and I'm not going to take credit for that. And I have people who at work, I have a wonderful team who have ownership because I delegated to them, and they do a lot of the work. And I have a partner. I'm very lucky, we are two parents who are taking care of our children, and all of this comes together, and then you compromise. So instead of canceling gym, I do 30 minutes instead of an hour. Instead of seeing a friend, I do a power breakfast instead of a drink. Instead of watching movies, I watch series now because they're much shorter. So at night, I have 30 minutes. And you cut everything short because it is a pizza that's being sliced and given to many more people. You had it for your own, and then everyone wants a piece. And you just have to have thinner slices. But I don't know if anyone has it right. I mean, it is a compromise on many levels. Yeah.
So speaking of these various avenues where you spend your time, are there any particular ones that give you inspiration or motivation?
Yeah, my kids are my biggest inspiration. I'm very lucky. So of course, it takes a lot of time to raise children, but because they're still within the age, which is also Makuki's target audience. It's amazing. They were very helpful. It's very helpful for many reasons. First, I can enter play areas and observe without being weird.
Market research.
Because I have my children with me. Can you imagine an adult just being there alone? I call all their friends for play dates and pass on the iPad and watch their behavior. I have free access to mom groups and parent groups and fathers. And it's amazing. I mean, they come with their own perks. I shoot most of our promotions with my children free of charge, and I can post on social media without consent forms. A lot. It's amazing. It's amazing, really, and it helps. But they also have ideas of their own. My 4-year-old thinks she works for Makuki, because we do a lot of office hours
she does,
together.
right? Technically she does.
Technically she does. She comes to the office a lot. I ask her to draw. I ask her opinion, and then I give her money because she skipped a play date. So she actually thinks she's getting paid. And it's working. And we have a lot of content coming because of that.
Give her a stock option.
I should, but I've worked so hard for that. So I'm always in conflict, you know. But yeah, thank you for giving her ideas. It's good to have kids when you're in this business. It's good. Yeah. It's good to have kids when you're in this business. That's all I can say. So they are a very big help and inspiration.
So, so I have one actually final question before I open it up to the audience. But there was actually a recent study that showed that less than 20% of business owners within the MENA region are held by women. And having started your own company here, is there any advice or inspiration you would give to those who are aspiring to do so?
Yes. First, I think that 20% is probably is not reflective of how many people, how many women tried to be entrepreneurs and succeeded. I think it's how many people actually branched out and were brave enough to leave the corporate world and be entrepreneurs. And I think that this percentage is low because of many factors, and I really hope that this will change soon and everybody will contribute to this change. I think that there are a lot of initiatives supporting female entrepreneurs, female-led startups, and that's great, but that's not where the problem is. The problem is to be able to be an entrepreneur, you have to have leadership skills, you have to take the decision to be on your own. And to be able to do that, you should be confident enough to do it. And you should also know that once you do that, you are supported. And unfortunately, we still live in a society where there is, you know, this type of upbringing of girls where they're like, don't do this, you're a girl. Is she being too, you know, messy, while boys fall and bump themselves and climb trees, and it's the norm. It's like, it's normal, he's a boy. And then girls try to do the same thing, and you're like, but are you sure, you know, she's too boyish, she's too tomboyish. I heard people saying maybe she's hanging out with a lot of boys, you know, she's losing her femininity. And all this girl was doing was being curious, falling, having more bumps and hits and bruises. And that's normal, that's childhood. It's not about girls and boys. And then you have a lot of examples from the corporate world where there's still a pay gap. And there's still difference in the way women are promoted to what leadership positions. And most of the entrepreneurs don't just graduate and become entrepreneurs. They were working somewhere. And what they've been fed and trained to feel, they continue and carry onto their journey in the entrepreneurial life. And also there's the bigger problem, which is the unfair distribution of responsibilities in families. that is still existing in our society. Female parents and male parents are not expected to have the same responsibilities at home. And I'm not talking here about role segregation. I'm not saying a family unit who consciously decided we have a breadwinner and we have a primary nurturer. I'm talking about family units who have a male breadwinner, a female breadwinner, plus primary nurturer. How do you expect this woman or this female to do the same amount of work when given half the time that this male is doing or achieving? It is impossible. So until we are conscious of all of these factors and we speak up and talk about them and put our foot down and say, I am not going to be with a partner who does not do his share. I'm not going to raise my daughters, be with a cushion and a bubble, and I'm not going to give male attributes to positive things and female adjectives to negative things. And until the corporate world realizes and fixes its pay gap and gender opportunity problems, these numbers are not going to improve, no matter how many initiatives support entrepreneurs later on in life, really.
Yeah.
I think we have to go back to the basics.
Absolutely. All right, we'll open it up to the audience for questions. Females, it's International Women's Day.
Maybe no
Any
questions?
No
I
questions?
have one. How can man specifically help in what you're describing? I mean, everyone has a role in improving what you're mentioning here. Can men do something more specific?
Yes.
To try to advance this?
Yes, I think, first of all, thank you very much for this question. I don't think that isolation works in any way. I'll give you an example from a cookie, actually, because it is dear to my heart and I keep having arguments with everybody about it. A lot of children's, or forget children's apps in specific, a lot of brands who market for children speak to women only when advertising their products. And I'm talking about clothes, diapers, creams. I saw a diaper ad where they said that shuddi and fix it and shuddi sharit and they're excluding the father. Fathers never change diapers. I actually messaged them. And of course, because it's very important to talk about these things. So at Mokuki, we never speak to mothers alone. We never, ever exclude fathers. We say, your children, atfalukum, do this, allimuhum. We don't say allimihum, which is something in Arabic where you speak to females only and exclude fathers. Men can do a lot. Men have to do a lot because this is not only a woman's thing, it's a men's thing. First of all, I think that men need to start from on a societal level and change definitions. So instead of calling raising your children not call raising your children babysitting, or not saying doing your part of the job helping your wife, because it's not a husband-wife department, it's a parent-parent department. Standing up for your colleagues at work. I think that if a male is aware that a female colleague of theirs is underpaid or deserved a promotion and didn't get it, they need to speak up as much as the women are speaking up. I think that management has to stop punishing women for the responsibilities they have in their social life and actually contribute to talking to men about how they have to do their share. So that problem wouldn't even exist. So a lot of corporations take the excuse of, yeah, but she might start a family, or she might have kids soon, and I don't think, will she be up for the job? Instead of saying that, how about telling all the fathers in the company, you have to leave early because, you have a job to do. I don't know, at Google, you probably don't have these problems as many as other companies, but you'll be amazed. I've been exposed to so many men shying away from saying, I have to leave because I want to do chores. They say, I want to leave because I want to see my kids. While a female will say, I want to leave because I have bath time. Not many males will stand up and say, I have bath time. They will say, I'm seeing my kids. It's not a custody battle where you have viewership for your children. You actually have to actively stand up and say, that's normal, it's normalized. Men have a lot to do. And of course, just being good partners, colleagues, friends, it's very helpful. And changing our language. I have to insist on that because we do tend to use a lot of female adjectives negatively, and male adjectives positively. And I'm not going to mention what the words are. They're not very, probably censored. But we have to change our language. It's very, very important because actions follow words, and our words are very important. It's very, very important. So stand up for each other because we are in it together. It matters.
Absolutely. Dina?
Firstly, thank you so much for coming in and speaking today. I've really enjoyed hearing what you said. One of the core elements of gender diversity is to really understand what each side is going through. And it sounds like you're very knowledgeable. Can you share a little bit of insight about how you became so knowledgeable, what you do to increase your awareness?
I'm a feminist at heart, so I don't think there are any limitations to what people can do. People are people. But I also have a lot of men in my life, and I befriended both for a very, very long time. And just sharing stories, connecting, talking to each other, seeing the side of men. So I had a conversation with a guy friend, and I was telling him, can you believe, this girl didn't get a promotion because it was known that she will start a family. And the company was reluctant to give her a promotion because in their head they assumed she's going to leave. Eventually she's going to leave. Why should we invest in her? Why should we give her a promotion and a raise? And it was very nice to hear his side of the story where he was telling me about the same problem his wife was facing. And so when he was talking about his wife, he said it with so much anger and frustration, and it's not fair, and there's injustice. While when it happened at the company, he didn't have the same feelings. And just being able to see not that one person's point of view is not consistent, depending on what social role they're at, was very interesting. And it tells you that we have a separation between how we feel depending on where we are in our social roles. And maybe that is the problem. If we were a better integrated, if there was an integrated ecosystem where society, work, children spoke more to each other, we could find better solutions. It would be very helpful. But maybe from speaking both to males and females at work and friends, and seeing both sides of the same person speaking differently, and then bringing it to their awareness, or them bringing something to my awareness, and just continuous conversations, just conversing with everybody all the time.
And I think there's one thing that is unique about you is that you're curious and that you don't necessarily settle for, you like to get your answers right. And I think that I can see you as a child probably asking a lot of questions. And
Yes, I do like to ask questions. I do. I love debates, and they're very healthy, and they become heated, but it's always good to question something.
Yeah, absolutely. Much do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question actually on the content space. So it's also a topic that's dear to us, but I'd like to get your insights on what you think the Arabic content landscape looks like today, and how do you see people in the region responding to your content? Like, are people happy? Do they want more? Like, what kind of feedback are you getting about the content that you're producing?
So when we first started, and we started producing the content, the feedback was not always positive because our characters looked different. For example, Makuki, when Makuki started, he had horns. And my idea was, these are just satellite, receptors, and he's coming from outer space, and we started getting a big backlash on that. And we didn't realize that, okay, that was a big no, so we need to change it. Where we are today is definitely positive. We're getting good feedback on our content because we listen. We look at our comments, we look at our reviews. We get a lot of comments on our social media platforms. And we work a lot with academics to see what they would like in form of structure, so that we structure our content in a specific way that is age relevant. But we also work a lot with psychologists, nutritionists, emotional intelligence coaches for children, and we get their feedback and we produce accordingly. So there's always a conversation about why are we producing this content, because for us it has to be content with purpose, be it educational or entertaining. And we look at the purpose before looking at just a piece of content. In terms of where the Arabic content is today, I think a lot of effort is being done. Everybody's upping their game on every level, be it the creation, the content itself, or the production. The quality of the content is getting better and better because we are working with a market that has exposure to international content, and the quality is wonderful, and the content itself is so studied and a lot of research has gone behind it. Our characters are loved, and there are pieces that get much more views than others, much more likability than others, and we're realizing more and more it's everything that has more humor, entertainment value, mistakes. Children love to watch other children do mistakes and fall and bump their heads, and they love lightness and silliness, and then they kind of found their way, and I think they relate to it. They don't want to see heroes and people and children who never do mistakes, who act so right, and which often tends to be the messaging here, all the preaching. So we're also adapting to that, and we're making sure that we have more of that happening in our content. Yeah.
So you've been thinking about the character for a while before you left your job. At what point did you feel ready to quit and to pursue it full time? Like, how much had you actually gotten done before you did that?
Not much. I thought that I will not get much done before I quit. So, which is also, there are two ways to doing it. You either start working on your business before you quit, and once you see something materializing, you quit your job. Or you just say, okay, the only way to move forward with this is if I disconnect, detach, break up, and start my new life. And it's a character, and that's my character. I can't overlap. I don't like overlapping because I think it's, the separation happened here. And the minute I was attached to Makuki so much, I don't think I will be doing my job very well. So walking into the office became just another day at the office, and it's not fair, and you are kind of disconnected. So I just left and then started focusing really on Makuki, but the idea was there. But not much of it was materialized while I was at my old job. Plus, it was very demanding, and the hours were very long, and the meetings were endless because that's what corporates love to do, you know? So it was not easy. So I disconnected and then started Makuki. Yes.
Maybe a bit about your startup journey. So I'm sure you started with a romantic idea of what you really wanted to do, right? So
yes.
There's this big idea that you're really passionate about, but then, like you said, when you sit across people who are investing in your business or your customers, you usually tend to move away and let the market guide you. Did you have to make such a move, and if yes, how did that make you feel?
Yes, and I had to do that type of not compromise, shift. I still have to do it, and I think I will continue to do it, because there's the part of you that is romantic, and you know, I have still a lot of ideas that probably won't see the light for a while until, you know, I convert them into valid business ideas and revenue streams. But yes, you do tend to do that, and it's not easy. It's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating to the creative in me, and there's always a conflict. But then I also understand that if I don't make the business side of it work, I will never have this creative outlet. So I have to make it work, and I have to do the compromises. Now, the only difference is I pick my battles. So there are things that I will not do, no matter what happens, because there is no point in then, you know, going on if you lose your brand identity. That I won't compromise on. But there are things that you give, you know, your character a makeover, you give a touch here and there. We introduced dialects, for example, so now the characters speak Saudi, Emirati, Egyptian, Lebanese, and you do that, right? But it cannot just be a dream, because if I just wanted to produce what I love to produce, then I should have just produced it myself and continued as an artist, probably had a blog or had you know, a social media platform where I upload things. But the minute it becomes a business, it has to make business sense. It has to. And I don't fight that anymore, because there's no point fighting it and still wanting people's money. You just can't. You can't have it both ways. So it is frustrating, but I do have two hats on, and I exchange them. And it's funny because I do tend to do the writing at night and the business work during the day. So I have a time split between both. I can't do both. So at night, I'm like horrible at business, and during the day, I'll meet my, you know, my target. That's the kind of thing. It is frustrating, though. It's very frustrating.
So I personally really enjoyed listening to your
Thank
story
you.
and gained a lot of valuable insights, which I'm sure everyone shares.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you, and yeah.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.